Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be installing EmuDeck to play all our favorite retro games on the Asus ROG Ally. Let's just jump right in. Let me show you what you'll be able to do at the end of this guide. And as you can see on screen, I'm in a front-end launcher called Emulation Station that was launched through Steam. A front-end is basically like a console interface that can launch all your games for you. So you can see here, all our systems are locked and loaded, and I can jump into any game, and it'll launch directly from here, and then end up back here after I'm done. That's the whole point of this video. Let's get you up and running with your favorite retro games. So how do we get to that point? And first, let's talk about what you need ahead of time as a prerequisite so that you can follow along. As of right now, on the ROG Ally launch day, the Windows version of EmuDeck is only available through Patreon for a price of $3.50 US per month. You have to subscribe per month if you want it to continue running, otherwise it'll only just last a month, because the program does check to see if you're logged in and gives you access to it if you are. Now, if it's anything like the SteamOS build, it'll become free in the future, we just don't know when. So it could end up being a few months, or it could end up being 1 month, but we'll see what happens. So if you're here from the future, check to see if it's free first before doing anything else, and if so, is Reddit working again? Does Reddit is fun exist again? I hope so. You're most likely going to want a keyboard and mouse for this guide. I'd highly suggest it, as it would make everything a lot easier for you. I'm going to be using Remote Desktop for mine. I ended up using TeamViewer and then Google Remote Desktop because TeamViewer blocked me. You have to remember that the ROG Ally doesn't have Windows Pro on it out of the box, so it's just Windows Home, so you can't do Remote Desktop as you normally would. After you've subscribed to their Patreon on your Ally, head over to their Early Access GitHub, and you want to download the most recent executable. At the time of this recording, it's 2.1.1.4. Windows might warn you about it being malicious, just select keep if you can. Open the executable, and it's going to do a whole bunch of things and open some windows. Don't freak out. Mainly, it's going to install Git. Let it do its thing. Restart EmuDeck when it says to by closing the application and reopening the executable. Mine also installed 7-zip, but you might have to do that yourself. And you should have Steam installed by default with the Ally. If not, just install Steam. You might have to restart EmuDeck again after both of those as well. Now you'll have to prove you subscribe to their Patreon, so log in with your Patreon. It'll give you a long token, copy that to your clipboard, head back into the EmuDeck application, and paste that token on the screen. We have the option to do easy mode or custom mode. Let's do custom mode so that I can show you everything and get you set up properly. The first thing we're going to do is select your EmuDeck directory. This is where your ROMs will be stored, as well as saves, BIOS, and other files. Other EmuDeck files are going to be saved in your C folder in your user drive, and I'll show you that later. I want to use my SD card for this, so I'm going to choose that option. But this part will be up to you to decide where to put them. You might get an error like I did about unwritable drive. Just try again until it works. Click Next when you're done, and now we just need to select our device, which is the ROG Ally, of course. Click Next again, and we get a whole bunch of options for which emulators we want to install. You'll notice Yuzu is selected over Ryujinx, and so if you're someone that prefers one over the other, I'd make that change now. If you don't know which to select, leave it default. Feel free to add or remove any emulators at this stage that you want. Let me give you a quick rundown of what each of these does. RetroArch will basically install emulators for everything. Dolphin is for Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii. PPSSPP is for the PlayStation Portable. DuckStation is PlayStation 1. Melon DS is the Nintendo DS. Citra is for Nintendo 3DS. PCSX2 is PlayStation 2, RPCS3 is the PlayStation 3, Yuzu or Ryujinx is for the Nintendo Switch, CMU is for the Nintendo Wii U, and Emulation Station is the front end to display all of these. And I showed it earlier, so that should give you an idea of what that looks like. Leave that checked as well because we're going to need it. You'll notice Xenia for the Xbox 360 is missing. Don't worry, we'll add it later. Click Continue when you're ready, And this page is saying EmuDeck will configure all of these emulators for us, and we want that, so click continue. For configuring autosave, this option is if you want to automatically save your game state when you exit the emulators you see on the right, and then load them when you jump into those games again. This is a fantastic feature in RetroArch and should be enabled, so click on and continue. RetroAchievements is optional, but for those that don't know, you can earn achievements in retro games, and it's a fantastic optional feature. I personally use it, but if you don't and you want to, head to the link above and register, and then come back here and put your username and password, and then click login. It should say you've successfully logged in. Keep hardcore mode disabled unless you really want it. I'll leave a link to what this does in the description as well, just in case you're interested. But for 99% of people, disable this. Click continue when you're done. This next part is going to be personal preference for everyone. If you're playing in the normal aspect ratio for what each platform was, you're going to have black bars on the side of the screen. You absolutely can play with the native aspect ratio off, but then it'll look like Mario just ate an ROG Ally, and I can't endorse that level of stretching. So with black bars on the sides, you have the option of adding cool looking bezels to spruce it up. You can click it to on to see an example. I personally don't want this, so I'll turn it off, but make your decision and click continue. I used Mario as my example before, but if you want wide Sonic, here you go. For Sega systems, do you want the correct native aspect ratio for the consoles, or do you want them stretched slightly? Pick your choice and click continue. For me, I'll always be using the native aspect ratio on all systems today. Same thing here with Nintendo systems, and this one I'm going to select the 8x7 option for authenticity. Make your choice and continue. Dreamcast and Nintendo 64 are weird ones, as there's actually widescreen hacks out there for some games, and they let you use more of the screen. Again, for me, I want the original, but this would be one I'd be swayed to say yes to the 16:9 option. Click continue. Same thing as the Nintendo 64 here, GameCube has widescreen hacks available, and so make your choice and click continue. Shaders are another cool feature of RetroArch, helping to try and show as much of the original consoles as it can. Click between yes and no on adding this LCD shader and what your preference might be. I'm going with off and then click continue. Same exact question for the 3D consoles. Make your choice and click continue. And now we get to choose what we want our front end to look like. This is Emulation Station that I showed earlier, and my theme was Epic Noir, if you liked it. There's options here for themes, so pick what you like best and click next. Now we have a full checklist of all the decisions we made and what EmuDeck is going to install and configure. Give it a look over if you want and then click finish. EmuDeck is going to do its thing. Perfect time for you to check on those loved ones. This will take some time. Here's Carlos. Once you see that installation complete screen, click next. We have the option of setting up Cloud Sync with other EmuDeck installations. I'm going to turn this off since I don't have any other EmuDeck installations. But if you did, choose yes and then just log into your cloud provider of choice on the next screen, and then click Copy Games. This next screen is where things diverge a little bit. You can use Steam as your front end to play all your games, and we can set it up that way, or we can use Emulation Station as the front end for all your retro games. For me personally, I want my retro games separate from my Steam library, and so a separate launcher, and I prefer that option. But you don't need to choose anything right now, you'll see how this works in a second. Open the Steam ROM Manager, and it'll take a few seconds to load. Now just minimize your open windows and head to your File Explorer, and then navigate to whichever drive you selected earlier to install EmuDeck to. Mine was my SD card, so I'll head there and you'll see an emulation folder. Go inside and now you'll see BIOS and ROMs, and you can guess where we're headed next. I can't help you with this part, but this is exactly where you want to put your BIOS files and your ROM files. So let me show you how I'll be doing it. Going into the BIOS folder, I'm going to paste my BIOS files inside. Yuzu and Ryujinx have their own folders for their keys and firmware, so you can place them in there. If you're not sure if you did everything correctly, open up the minimized EmuDeck application and head to BIOS Checker. And you can see here what's missing and how to fix it. The right side has a great cheat sheet for more information as well. Now we move on to ROMs, and in the ROMs folder, you'll see every subfolder for all systems. So it should be pretty self-explanatory at this stage, but put your ROMs inside of the folder of the system it matches. Once you've put all your ROMs in, open the Steam ROM Manager window that we minimized before. And now we're on a page called Parsers. And here's where you'll have to make some decisions. Any emulators checked on this page will show in Steam as a library item. And so if you want all your emulators and games to show in Steam and launch via Steam, go ahead and select each emulator you want that for. Regardless of what you select here, Emulation Station will still have all your games, and so if you just want to use that as your front end, like I am, then I'd select toggling all parsers off and enabling two options, Emulation Station and Emulators. For some reason, I could not get only Emulation Station to work, so I had to add both. Click Preview at the bottom and then click Parse. If you chose to show all your games in Steam, you'll see them all here. Some artwork doesn't match at all, and we can fix this later. Otherwise, if you're like me, you'll see Emulation Station and Emulators. Now click Save to Steam and exit out of Steam ROM Manager. And so we're basically done, but let's talk about some other settings. Back out to the main EmuDeck screen and this time head to Manage Emulators. If you pop into each emulator, you'll be able to see your hotkeys on the right, which is super useful. Feel free to go through them all and read to learn more about each emulator. One thing you need to know is how to exit each emulator. Now let's close out EmuDeck and open Steam. In your library under Emulation, open Emulation Station. And so this is our front end, where you can see all your games and platforms. If you scroll through, you see everything, and we jump into a platform, we see a list of games. Now let's get some artwork. Push the Start button on your Ally and head to Scraper. And now we can scrape from Screen Scraper or the Games DB. I would usually personally suggest Screen Scraper, especially if you have a large library, and you might need a Screen Scraper account. But despite my recommendation, it didn't seem to work for me, so I ended up using the Games DB. For other settings, which systems to scrape, what games to scrape, and what to scrape, it's all personal preference. If you run into an issue with your thumbnail not matching like mine for Eternal Sonata, let's show you how to fix it. The button X shows your media, and you can scroll through and see what everything looks like. Just make sure you're in gamepad mode or X won't work properly for you. Last thing to show, on the main menu, head to Other Settings and then Alternative Emulators. This area shows what emulator is being used for each system, and also where you can change it if you want. If you're new to all this, I would leave everything as is, but for more advanced users, have at it. Now, I mentioned it before, and the eagle-eyed of you noticed that I had Xbox 360 showing, but it wasn't something we could add through EmuDeck. Let's talk about adding it. The ROM process is the same as you did before. There's an Xbox 360 folder in the ROMs folder, and so you're going to throw your ROMs in there. The only difference is there's a subfolder called ROMs, and you have to put them inside that. Now we need to add the actual emulator. Head to Xenia Canary's GitHub page and download the latest experimental release. We're using Xenia Canary as the main Xenia is way behind and won't run anything well. Extract the zip and you get a folder Xenia_Canary. Rename it to just Xenia. Go inside and you'll see Xenia_Canary and the executable. Rename that to Xenia as well. Now head to C users, whatever your name is, EmuDeck, Emulation Station, Emulators folder. And you want to paste the Xenia folder here. My username is obviously Joey, yours will be different, so just navigate to this section. Run the executable and close it. you should see a TOML file. Open it with Notepad, and then you want to find the full screen section and change it from false to true. Now, this next setting helped make Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey playable. I can't speak to other games, but you want to set D3D12 clear memory page state to true. Save and close. Another special tweak for Lost Odyssey, head to the Xenia Canary patches GitHub and download the zip. Extract it and grab that patches folder and paste it into the Xenia folder. Go into the patches folder and find the Lost Odyssey patch that I'm showing on screen and open it with Notepad. Let's enable 60 FPS, so change it from false to true. Let's also disable depth of field and change that to true. Disable motion blur, change to true. And lastly, disable shadows, change to true. Save and exit. You're done. Open Emulation Station, head to Xbox 360, ignore the weird Rango thumbnail, not sure why it shows that, and play your games. That's all there is to it. Lost Odyssey, by the way, will play great. Let's get into some other fixes that you need to do. If you want retro achievements for PS1 games, EmuDeck doesn't currently add them for it, so we want to head back to the area we were just in, which is the C users, whatever your name is, EmuDeck, Emulation Station, Emulators, and the DuckStation folder. Open the DuckStation application, go to Settings at the top, Achievements, and Enable Achievements. Log in on the right, close and exit. For PlayStation 2, two things and one of them is a fix. Right now, even though I have the BIOS in the right folder, and it says detected in EmuDeck, it actually doesn't work. So if you get the same error, head to the C users, your name, EmuDeck, Emulation Station, Emulators, PCSX2 folder. Open the PCSX2 application, Settings at the top, BIOS, browse to your EmuDeck BIOS directory, so C Emulation BIOS for me, and you should see the file show up in the list underneath. Now, we also need to fix retro achievements if you want those, so head to the Achievements tab on the left, enable achievements, log in on the right, and close and exit. For PSP, it wasn't going full screen automatically, so just enable full screen. Head to the top and enable full screen. It'll remember it for the future games. Citra right now doesn't actually work, so hold off on 3DS at the moment. I'm actually not sure what's wrong with it. And that's it. You should be at a playable state for everything, and the rest is just tips and tricks that can help make things a little bit better, but to get everything in a playable state, we're basically done. One thing you should do is memorize all of the hotkeys, and I know I mentioned it before, but definitely memorize how to exit a game because it's different for each emulator. I'll show it off for most games, and it's going to be start and select. I hope this guide was helpful to you. Share in the comments below any tips and tricks that you found on top of this guide that might make things a lot better for others that are looking to play retro games on their ROG Ally. I'd love to see how you've been optimizing everything for your retro games. If you liked today's video, check out my review on the Miu Mini Plus. It's this little handheld right here, and it's a great complement to something like the ROG Ally. you'll be able to play all your favorite retro games in a smaller form factor. Please don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.